So today we are going to be talking cesarean traps, and I'm just going to tell you what a cesarean trap is. These are the things that undermine your confidence in your body's ability to birth, because the truth is that birth is a physiological process, not a medical one. And that means that when you don't schedule surgery or you don't perform surgery, eventually a baby will come out of a vagina. But because of our medical system and the way that they've really made C-sections so easy to perform, what happens is often a lot of C-sections are performed for profit, convenience, liability issues, just because they have now pathologized pregnancy and birth, and they've put you on a strict timeline that doesn't actually support the physiological process. A lot of what happens in the natural childbirth that's seen in mainstream and in the hospital leads to inductions, cesareans, more Pitocin, more interventions. And I know that if you're in this community, that's not what you want. You want to be the one to decide when these things are necessary for you, because maybe in 10 to 15% of the population, we do need to have these interventions, and that is what it's for. But our cesarean rates are climbing through the roof. There are hospitals where pretty much everyone gets a C-section. There are doctors that you go to them, and the only way you're getting a natural birth is if you go in last minute and the doctor doesn't get on call in time and you push that baby out before they can wheel you into the OR. There are doctors that are so impatient that they will then tell you that they just want to schedule a C-section because you have a big baby, or your baby's too small, or you've had a previous C-section, or your body mass index is too high, or your hips are too small. They just keep coming up with excuses over and over. And that's why I've coined the term natural birth traps and cesarean traps. In fact, when I Google this term, it doesn't come up. So I know that I have now coined this term. This is my term: natural birth traps, cesarean traps, induction traps. They are all traps within the system. And oftentimes you don't know that they're a trap because they're so common that you don't even think about them. It's just what your care provider does. They act like it's normal. They act like it's just something that everybody goes through, and this is just how things are. So then you go into the mom groups and you ask for help, and you get more reassurance that your doctor must know what they're talking about. So you should probably just follow their lead because they know what's best. And then there's moms that have been traumatized by the medical system, but they don't realize that what they're actually dealing with is birth trauma. So then they say, well, you know, your birth plan just goes out the window. That's just what happens. I mean, I wanted to have a natural birth, but labor wasn't progressing. I didn't go into labor on my own. I didn't dilate, and I had to have a C-section. And thank God I did, because the baby's cord was wrapped around their neck, and I probably would have had a dangerous outcome. I'm just going to tell you right now that the cord around the neck, that's a scapegoat. In fact, Rachel Reed talks about this on her blog, Midwife Thinking, and she says the nuchal cord, which is what they call a cord wrapped around the neck, the perfect scapegoat. Okay, so last week, of course, we talked about the cesarean traps, and I gave you the big 5, which was a small baby, a big baby, breech baby. If you've had twins, and I believe the last one was high risk that I talked about. So you can go back and watch that video. The truth is that there are so many traps within the maternity care system and within our birth culture that leads to you thinking that your body doesn't work, and then you end up in a C-section, or you end up in an induction, you end up with an episiotomy, you end up with the epidural. So I'm going to be talking these traps because I really want this information out there, and it's not being taught. In fact, if you go and try to look this stuff up in a lot of social media, you're not going to find it, or it's going to be behind a paywall. So my goal is to get this out there as fast as humanly possible. And part of how you can help as my empowered birth community is you can also give me ideas of things that you've seen that you might want to have me expand on. Even if you've already had your empowered birth, if you've recognized that there are some things that could have led to you having a different outcome, you could have ended up in a trap if it wasn't for what you've been learning, just send me a message or put it inside the Facebook group. I'm asking questions as well and doing prompts so that you can start answering these questions, because I'm collecting all of this information and I'm putting it out there because I am committed to making 2023 the year of empowered birth, the year that we start really taking our power back. We have been trying for the last 10 years, and this is what I saw when I joined Improving Birth and starting that movement, is that we were starting to become aware of birth trauma, and we were starting to become aware that we had options that were not being given to us, that there was no informed consent. And the reason for that is because back in the 90s is the first time when they really decided that, yeah, you actually need to get consent from pregnant and birthing people before you do an intervention. Like, you can't just tell women that they have to do something. You actually have to give them the reasons, and then they get to make their decision. But before that, no, there was no informed consent. They just did things. So our mothers and our grandmothers and our aunts, and even if we have like older sisters who are like in Gen X, like they basically went through trauma, but it was normal. So that's why this isn't being taught. This is why this is not being seen. And I really started to see when I pulled the curtain, and I'm like, oh, look at all of this, what's going on behind the scenes. I'm also a history buff. So I love to learn about what happened in the past. And a lot of what happened in the past is informing what our birth culture is today. So when I talk about cesarean traps and natural birth traps, that's what I'm really talking about, is all of these little things that we've seen as normal that are undermining our confidence and causing all of these problems. And then we think we need to have a C-section when we don't. And we feel like we're backed into a corner when we're not. And I was almost backed into a corner for a C-section. It was very close to happening. But because I'm good and stubborn, and I also have some psychology behind me in my background, I was able to ask the right questions and be like, if there was really a problem, they would have already wheeled me out for a C-section and taken that baby now. I don't think there's a problem. I think they just are, they're doing a could, might, possibly, maybe happen, which is what I call it. When it's like they're trying to be better safe than sorry, but that risk is so minuscule that it doesn't matter. And that's what we're really talking about today with these 5 traps, these 5 cesarean traps that I'm going to be talking about today. So what are they? Okay. So number 6 on the list is a repeat C-section, just in case. So this is very, very typical. If you've already had one cesarean or more than one cesarean, and you go to your OB on your first appointment, like your very, very first appointment, and your doctor says, oh, you had a previous C-section. Well, we can try for a VBAC. However, we should probably schedule your C-section right now, get it on the books, so that if something happens and we can't do a VBAC, then at least we have it on the books and we don't have to worry about it. Big trap. Red flag, red flag, red flag. This is not a VBAC supportive care provider. This is a care provider who is going to do everything in their power to undermine your confidence so that you end up giving up on that VBAC. And if you hit that date when you're not going into labor yet, and usually they schedule a repeat C-section for 39 weeks, which if you've been following me for a while, you know the average gestation is 41 weeks and 3 days, and some moms are 42 weeks. So if you were a 42-week mama and you were induced at 41 weeks and you ended up having a C-section, what are the odds that you're really going to go into labor by 39 weeks when your doctor has scheduled that repeat C-section? Do you know why they are scheduling a repeat C-section at 39 weeks? Because that way you don't go into labor before they have that C-section. Now that doesn't make any sense, does it? However, this is often what happens, is that when you're going for a VBAC, they say, let's schedule your C-section just in case, so that we have it on the books. That is a huge trap. You do not want to fall into it. Here's what you want to say to your doctor if they try to pull that crap. You say to them, thank you, but I'm not going to be scheduling my C-section. I'm comfortable with having a VBAC. And if at any point I feel that I need to have a C-section, then we can do that. But I'm not scheduling surgery just because. That doesn't make any sense to me. And if your doctor goes over your head and schedules that C-section anyway, and you get that C-section date, that doesn't mean you have to show up. So even if the receptionist rings you up and says, hey, by the way, your C-section date is scheduled, and you say, but I didn't schedule a C-section. First of all, now you understand that your doctor is trying to go over your head. And if you're early enough in your care that you don't recognize that, hey, I don't actually have to have this C-section, that can be very, very scary. But this is also why I teach my clients, and I teach you in the content, how to hire your care provider. And again, I do have content on how to hire your care provider. You can always check my YouTube channel for those videos as well. And I'm going to keep teaching this stuff because, again, it's not out there. It's not mainstream. And my goal with this is to have everybody understand that you have choices, you have options, you can create your own options. You do not have to fight, beg, or compromise on your birth plan to get a birth that is actually what you want. You don't have to compromise on your VBAC. So no, you do not have to schedule a repeat C-section just because you had a previous C-section, just in case. That is a trap. The next one on the list. So the next one is failure to progress. This is the other one. When your care provider says, you've been in labor for 12 hours and there's no baby and you don't seem to be dilating, so we should probably do a C-section. No. In fact, this is so prevalent that in 50 Shades Freed, I read the end of the book. It's not in the movie, but it's in the book. And I have a theory that the author may have been processing something, or maybe it was just so common that she just thought, oh, well, I'll just put this in. But it wasn't even necessary. It didn't really tie into anything. Like saying that she had almost died in childbirth because she was having this, she was having this long labor. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, she probably almost died on the operating table because C-sections are major abdominal surgery. So maybe if they'd left her alone, it wouldn't have happened. But anyway, it's a fictional character, but it speaks to our birth culture. And you can also see this on TV where there are characters who are having a long labor. In fact, I believe it was also in What to Expect When You're Expecting, the movie, when Elizabeth Banks' character, who was natural birth mama, getting all excited, and then she gets on her back in the bed and her labor is just so intense that she begs for the epidural, and then things happen and she has to go in for a C-section. And it's like the message of don't plan natural birth because it's probably not going to happen. Like, this is how ingrained in the culture it is for failure to progress, as if it's an actual thing. I'm just going to tell you what a lot of birth workers have said over the years. Failure to progress is failure to wait. So if you're not dilating at the level that your care provider wants you to, you do not actually need to have Pitocin, and you do not need to have a C-section. It's only if you are exhausted and you're thinking, you know what, I just want this over with and I'm choosing this as the best option for me, that's different. But somebody else saying that you're not going into labor at the right level for their timeline, I'm just going to tell you that the timeline was arbitrary. It was made up. Friedman's curve, which is what it's based on, is made up. It is made up by some man named Friedman who decided to study women in the hospital. And all of these women, if they didn't dilate 1 centimeter per hour, he thought that that was a problem. However, all of these women were also on Pitocin. So Pitocin contractions, again, are not allowing for the biofeedback for the baby and can put the baby in distress. In fact, there's something called pit to distress. So your care provider might also pit to distress you, then say you're failing to progress and your baby is in distress and we have to do a C-section. This is also why I say Pitocin is a huge natural birth trap, because the second you have Pitocin, your labor is hijacked. And as one of my friends has said, like, she actually said this herself. It's like if you put a brick on a gas pedal of a car with no steering wheel, and the car just drives and drives and drives, and it's going to smash right into a brick wall. It's not going to go where it needs to go. It might get to its destination, but it's like whoosh, crash. There's no brake. Like you've got a brick on the gas pedal. There's no brake, and there is no steering wheel. So like you're basically just, it's not going to work for you. Pitocin is not the same thing as oxytocin. In fact, I get into arguments with people on social media about this, where someone will come in, just like some troll, and they will say, well, you know, Pitocin is like, it's the same thing as oxytocin. Like, no, it is not. And you must be one of those medical professionals that seems to understand that Pitocin is like this miracle drug that will speed things up, but it's not the same thing as our hormones, and you have never seen a physiological birth. So I don't trust your judgment, because moms who have experienced both physiological birth and Pitocin, they know. And you probably know as well, if you've experienced it, is not the same thing. So failure to progress is a huge, huge cesarean trap. And it is one of the most common ones when you're being induced, when you're having Pitocin. If you are being induced and you have chosen induction, you need to be aware that if things go in a certain direction, baby gets into distress because they keep putting the Pitocin up, it's not a good idea. So I do have suggestions that I tell my clients when we create our induction plan, and I'm happy to share that with you as well. You can always send me a message, carly@empoweringmomsbirth.com. Okay, so the next one on our list is, I just actually said it, not dilating 1 centimeter per hour. Because with failure to progress, it's, oh, I'm not going into labor fast enough. I'm not having my baby fast enough. But not dilating 1 centimeter per hour is a deeper version of the failure to progress, because they could just say, well, you know, you've been stuck at 4 centimeters for the last hour, and like now we need to do the C-section. But you may not actually be in active labor. You might be in early labor, but now they've also ramped up the Pitocin and they've broken your waters and you're still at 4 centimeters. That's failure to progress. Whereas a slow labor, where you are progressing, however, it's not 1 centimeter per hour, that's a different version of the failure to progress cesarean trap. And this is what could have happened to me, because during my second labor, I was not progressing 1 centimeter per hour. And because I was a second-time mom, there was automatically this bias and expectation that I would go faster. And I've talked about that with labor traps, about how if you are a second or third-time mom, the clock is even shorter. They expect you to go into labor and have your baby faster. And that's not always the case. Sometimes we need a shorter labor. Sometimes we need a faster labor. Sometimes we need a long labor. Sometimes we need a labor where we're getting lots of breaks. Sometimes we need a labor where we're stalling out a little bit so that we can get some rest, and then it's going to ramp up again. But that is not what the medical system is used to. The medical system is used to efficiency. And the textbooks are all talking about efficiency and the stages of labor. That is why it's a trap. So not dilating 1 centimeter per hour is a huge trap, because very few people actually will dilate 1 centimeter per hour. And Friedman's curve, even like when they said 1 centimeter per hour is normal, these women were all on Pitocin. So it is not actually accurate to say that you have to dilate 1 centimeter per hour. And if you're worried about your care provider trying to pull this on you, the easiest way to avoid it, you refuse to have vaginal exams. Because if you don't have a vaginal exam, they can't check your cervix. If they can't check your cervix, they don't know how dilated you are. If they don't know how dilated you are, they can't tell you that you're failing to progress, because they have no idea. So that is one of the things that I talk about with my clients as well. Other ways of checking dilation. And I'll probably talk about that in later videos in the future. So the next one, again, this is on the failure to progress. So we're really talking failure to progress and failure to get into labor before your scheduled C-sections, basically what the theme of this is. And the fact is that if you're taking longer than 12 hours, like 50 Shades of 50 Shades Freed in that one throwaway chapter that I can't stand, and they say you've been taking 12 hours, like you've been in labor 12 hours and there's no baby. So obviously this baby is not coming. This baby is stuck. Your pelvis is too small. Your baby's in distress. Whatever they need to do to talk you into having that C-section, the truth is it's been 12 hours. You're not out of the bed yet. You haven't been processed through their system. You're still on that clock, on that board. And there is an administration in the hospital that's looking at this and going, why hasn't this woman been given Pitocin yet? Why haven't you put them in for a C-section yet? I mean, we need to fill beds. We need to process people through this conveyor belt, and then we need to get them out of our hospital so we can bring more people in. It's a business. In fact, if you watch The Business of Being Born, you can actually see this in action. But it's true. If you are still on the clock at the hospital, they are going to try to keep pushing and moving things along. This is why I also advise my clients to plan for an unassisted birth so that they feel more confident being able to wait until the last minute to go to the hospital. Because then if they do end up having their baby in the car, it's not a huge emergency. It's not a big deal. And if they do end up having their baby at home, well, awesome. And if they end up having their baby at the hospital 1 hour before they get, like after getting into the hospital room, then that's even better. Because the longer you stay at the hospital, the more they are looking at that clock and being like, we need to get this moving because we need to fill these beds. In fact, when I was in labor with my son and I went to the hospital at a time when I thought that I was good and ready to go, when I got there, they said, if she delivers fast, she's delivering in triage because there's no beds. So they're really focused on how many beds are available and how many beds are not available. Now, if they were more supportive of physiological birth, they would have a different system set up, but they don't. So your most safest place to be laboring for most of your labor is at home because it's going to allow your oxytocin to flow. And then if you're also prepared for an unassisted birth, then it's okay to wait until the last minute to get to the hospital. It's okay if your water suddenly release and baby's coming now, and you just have to call the midwife to you, because that is something that you can do. However, if you're thinking, oh, I'm planning on going to the hospital and I'm planning to get the epidural, well, if you're planning those things, you still need to plan for an unassisted birth, because the truth is that babies come whether you are prepared or not. And the more prepared you are, the less painful it will be. And you might even go through your labor and be like, actually, I feel pretty good. I don't really need that epidural. And you go the whole time, and then you hit transition and it's 2 minutes and you're like, oh my God, I wish I had the drugs. And then it's over. So this is another thing. When labor takes a long time, it doesn't necessarily mean you're in pain the whole time. Now, if you're on Pitocin, that's a different story, because if you're on Pitocin and labor has taken 12 hours, then you are at the danger of putting your baby in distress. And this is again why I say Pitocin is the devil drug. And in the story, I think, I do believe that Anastasia, she was on Pitocin. I believe they had said that in the book. And I'm like, well, why the hell was she on Pitocin if it's only been 12 hours? Like, what the hell did you do to her? But yeah, that is a huge trap. And of course, I talk about this all the time, and I'm probably going to go deeper in this topic. And if you're loving these videos, please like, share, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please follow me on social media, because I'm really committed to getting this information out there so that you have it. Because the truth is that it's just not being taught. It's just not being taught. And you need that right education so that you can make an informed decision. Now, why does labor take so long? Why does labor stall out? Why is it that we can have this failure to progress happen so often? Well, that leads me to the final trap of the day, which is not eating and drinking. When they deny you food or drink. And the reason they deny you food or drink in labor is because they say you might aspirate if they need to do an emergency C-section. Let's look at that logic for a minute here. They are denying you fuel for your body that is going to allow you to have the energy to go through labor and push out your baby in case you need a C-section. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. What happens with a car that has no fuel? Does it go anywhere? No. If you have a plane and you have no fuel, what happens? Well, we're going to have a really bad crash, right? Same thing with your body. Your body needs fuel. This is why I tell my clients all the time. It's like, if you are having early labor signs and you still feel like eating, you want to eat protein-rich foods, because protein is it takes longer to digest. So you have more fuel. You do not want carbs. Those are fast energy things. And it feels crappy in your body and you crash. You have a sugar crash. We don't want you to have a sugar crash. We want you to be able to keep going. We want you to be able to rest. So oftentimes if labor stalls, one of the things that I did with my own labor when it stalled is I said, okay, I'm going to have a hamburger. I'm going to have the rest of my hamburger because I'm hungry again. Beforehand, I wasn't hungry. I didn't want to eat anything because I was in labor. But then my labor stopped and suddenly I was hungry again. So if you are at a point where you're like, I'm really hungry and I just want a cheeseburger, can't I just have a cheeseburger? And they're like, no, sorry, honey, you can only have ice chips, because if you need a C-section, you'll aspirate and then that will be a problem. No, I don't care what you have to do. Get your partner or your doula to sneak in a freaking cheeseburger and you eat it. And if they say you're not supposed to have food or drinks, like, you know what? I'd rather have this cheeseburger and puke it up during my transition rather than risk losing energy in my body and having a C-section because I now can't push my baby out because now labor has stopped and you guys have me on timeline. So please make sure you have food, make sure it's easy to digest, make sure you have water, make sure you have fluids. Coconut water is a really good one that you can have. Anything with electrolytes is really good for you to have in labor. In fact, I even had Gatorade just because I wanted to have that. I didn't end up drinking it too much. I had mostly water and I had frozen fruit because having something nice and icy cold while I was in that nice, warm, hot pool, it just felt fantastic to me. So I had bits of strawberry and I had little bits of apple that I was chewing. And I had, like, in earlier labor, I would have scrambled eggs and I'd have watered down oatmeal. Anything with protein in it is really good. I had chicken wraps. I had a ham sandwich from Subway. I had my hamburger and I just kept upping the protein, but you don't want to have a huge pasta dinner. So protein is what you need. And there are so many ways that you can get protein. So again, food and drink is super important. And yet it often leads, if they're telling you that you can't have these things in your labor and you're at the hospital and you're starving, this often leads to the other 4 things that I talked about with the failure to progress or not going into labor by a certain date, and they just schedule a C-section. They might even do this even if this isn't your first baby. They schedule a C-section for a breech the same way. And I talked about breech birth last week. But the idea is, oh, we'll schedule your C-section for 39 weeks. Why? Because they don't want you to go into labor. And the same thing with restricting food or drink and putting the IV in. The IV is a natural birth trap. Restricting food and drink is a natural birth trap. And it's also a cesarean trap. Because once you have just the IV fluids and you're puffed up, that can cause distress as well. It can cause high blood pressure because now you're swelling up. You've got all this fluid retention and it's not natural fluids. And then you're restricted to the bed at the same time. So it's a real problem that we have these interventions and it leads to more cesareans. So that's what I have for you today. And if you want to know anything else about the natural birth traps or cesarean traps, what you can do is you can download my guide, which you can get at my website, empoweringmomsbirth.com/guide. And that will give you the list of 20 traps to avoid when planning a natural birth. And I'm going to be adding to this as well to include the cesarean traps and the labor traps in the future. So just watch out for that. But the first iteration of that guide, if you get it now, you'll get those first 20 traps. And then I will continue to send you a newsletter every single week that's going to allow you to get more tips from me that are not seen in mainstream. So a lot of people are like, well, why do I need to do this? Because I mean, it's out there. I can find it on the internet. And I can tell you right now, from being in the birth community for over 10 years and actively searching for this stuff, it was really hard to dig up that information. It's not that easily available. You can't find it that easily available. But I've already done all the hard work for you. I found it. I've curated it. I've gone through and verified it. And then I'm passing it on to you through those newsletters. I'm passing it on to you through these videos. So again, like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Follow me on all of the social media channels at Empowering Moms Birth. And make sure that you're letting other people know about this, because I'm committed to making 2023 the year of empowered birth. And I'm committed to getting this information out there. And I want it accessible, because the real magic is not just in having the information, but having the other 5 pillars of empowerment, which I talk about, which is you need to have the right mindset. You need to have the right education, which you're getting for free every single week in this group. You need to have the right environment for birth, for learning. You need to have the right facilitators for teaching, for giving you what you need in your services and supporting your birth. And you need to have the right support in your friends and your family. And if they're getting all of the same mainstream information, you're now trying to educate them when you really need to be focusing on you right now. So I'm just going to tell you to stop trying to educate people, and instead just, you've got my content. Okay. So you can go and like, share, subscribe to my channels, and you can send those out into the mainstream just by sharing it on your own social media. And then you don't have to actually sit there and waste your energy convincing people. They can either watch the video or they don't. And if they don't, well, guess what? You know the information, so you know what traps to avoid, and you don't have to listen to those people that are telling you that you should just listen to your doctor and you should stop trying to trust your instincts, because your instincts must be wrong because you're a first-time mom or you're trying for a VBAC, and you know that's dangerous, right? So you shouldn't do that. And you should really just follow what the mainstream childbirth education is, because obviously they know more. But I'm telling you right now that I have been in the birth community for 10 years. I have talked to midwives, I've talked to doulas, I've seen all of the things that they wish you could know. And that's why I'm teaching them to you, because they couldn't. Because the doulas in the hospital, they can't tell you, especially if you're in labor in the hospital, because you know what? They can get kicked out of the room. So they could also end up coming in with another client in the future and being like, oh, we don't want you here. And they kick you out. That's what the doula community worries about quite often. We can be a strong advocate for you, but we have to do it in a way that still works with not getting us thrown out of the room. I, as a virtual doula, I attend births via Zoom, and I attend them with clients who are having an unassisted home birth. So there's nobody tying my hands behind my back or saying that if you don't do this my way, you won't get to see any more clients. You won't be able to attend any more births. It doesn't happen because I'm attending home births. But for anybody who's attending a hospital birth, your doula does have that fear. And they may not be able to say right out loud, it's a trap. They're just hoping. They're just hoping that you can see that it's a trap. And that's why my job is to really show you where the traps are, so that you can have those conversations with your doula and you can be like, I don't want anybody to touch me during my labor. Like, I know that this is a trap. And if this comes up, here's our code word that you can say to me so that they don't know that you're feeding me information that could get you kicked out of the room. And then that way I can do what I want to do. And same with your midwife. Your midwife is also looking like, I wish that she could read between the lines, because if she could, then she would know what I'm really trying to say is, do not call me until you are pushing that baby out. Because if you call me and I have to come and assess you, I've got the hospital has you on the clock. And if I don't do certain things, it's going to come back on me. I'm going to get in trouble. And my hands are tied. Like, I will get in trouble. And this is what we're dealing with in our birth culture and in our medical culture, and with the insurance and the idea of profit, convenience, and liability issues. And the fact that birth is built on the idea that our bodies are broken, and maternity care is it's based in misogyny. And it happened long before we actually got the right to vote. So you really have to be aware of the political game that is being played when these traps come out. And you really have to be aware of the psychological implications of what is going on, not just for yourself, not just for your partner, not just for your doula, but for your care provider and the medical team. And that is what I really help my clients understand. That is why I have my one-to-one coaching. It's why I also have my courses available now. And it's why I have a lot of content on my website. So you just go to empoweringmomsbirth.com and it's all there for you. You can go through a course, you can go through a guide, you can watch the videos on YouTube, you can reach out to me directly. We can work together one-to-one in support. We can work together in a group setting. Whatever you need, I'm here. Okay? Like, this is the way it is. It's like, this is our maternity care system. These are the traps that we have to deal with. And the more you are able to see it, the less likely you will get tricked out of your dream birth. Okay, so that's what I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Again, you can always go to my website, empoweringmomsbirth.com. I have a whole bunch of resources. I have a book, empoweringmomsbirth.com/book. I have a guide on the 20 traps that you want to avoid when it comes to planning a natural birth, which you can get at empoweringmomsbirth.com/guide. I have a shop as well with all the courses. So you can go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/shop. And you can always just like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. All right. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.